Good evening, welcome. I'm John. I'm a bookseller at Literati Bookstore in downtown Ann Arbor, Michigan. We're so pleased to welcome our friend Rebecca Scherm to our At Home with Literati series in support of A House Between Earth and the Moon, and in conversation this evening with Jia Tolentino. Just a reminder, for those of you who are joining us, webinar overview for you, the chat is closed, but you can keep the chat window open. I'll be sharing links to purchase the book in the chat throughout the event. Live transcription is available to you on the bottom of your screen using the CC icon if you need subtitles. And Q&A is accessible to you. We encourage you to submit questions using the Q&A whenever you'd like. I will read a selection of those questions at the conclusion of the conversation this evening. And if you're watching us later on YouTube, you can always find links to purchase books in the description directly below me. You can also like and subscribe to our channel to be kept up to date on all of our At Home with Literati events when they become available on our channel. And as a final reminder, you can shop for more books at literatibookstore.com to have shipped to your home anywhere in the United States. And if you live in Southeast Michigan or Ann Arbor, of course, our doors are open to the public for in-store shopping. Most of all, we'd just like to thank you for your attendance this evening or this morning or this afternoon, depending on where and when in the world or just outside the world you may be joining us. So without further ado, I'll introduce tonight's author and our interlocutor. Rebecca Scherm is the author of Unbecoming. She lives in California with her family. And Jia Tolentino is a staff writer at The New Yorker. She was a contributing editor at The Hairpin and the deputy editor at Jezebel, and her work has appeared in the New York Times Magazine, Grantland, Pitchfork, and other publications. She lives in Brooklyn. Please join me in welcoming Rebecca Scherm and Jia Tolentino into your living rooms.
Hi, Jia.
Hi, Rebecca. I'm clapping for you. I wish that you could hear all of everyone clapping for you in their living rooms. And John, I know you're gone now, but I would love to know what you meant by if you're joining from just outside the world or
like on a space station.
Like on the space station that Rebecca's currently on.
Yes.
Okay, so you were being inclusive of Rebecca at the start of the evening. I am
supportive.
What?
Who's being supportive, Jia?
I know, I'm gonna just be looking at this background all night. I am so happy to be here with you and celebrating the launch week of this book. It's, I think some of you here, we all know each other from beautiful Ann Arbor, but Rebecca is a dear friend of mine. And this book, from the second I heard you were writing it, I was like, I'm gonna lose my mind for this book. And that has been true every time we've talked about it, everything I've ever read for it. It's set on a space station, but I mean, maybe not, but and it still hits at the dead center of most of what I feel like I think about every day, which is, how to remain human in the midst of these vast structures that render us fairly powerless in every macro sense, but that task our daily existence with this sort of dangerous urgency, in the micro sense. And I fucking love this book. I've been recommending it to everyone. If anyone here hasn't read it yet, you are in for like a truly awful and wonderful, embracing, and devastating experience.
Sorry.
It's so
my
good.
way.
Well, let me ask you, there are so many things in this book, and I know this is probably the most annoying question that I could start by asking you, but how do you sum it up when people say hey, what's your book about? I was never able to answer that personally. I was always like, oh, then I would just run
Everything
away.
happens.
Yeah. What do you say?
I say that it is about a group of unlikely space station inhabitants, who some of whom are wanted to feel chosen and some of whom wanted to just get away. And they're preparing a space station for billionaires to live on, and it isn't going great.
There you go. This is the thing that I've remembered actually since I think I remember this from the very first conversation we ever had about this book, after you told me that you're writing a book set on a space station. And I'm obsessed with space, but I still remember this, and I still think about it all the time. And you said that it's about, and this isn't all the characters, as you said, some are just trying to escape, but it's about some of them, that these people are sent up there and they think it's because they're extraordinary, and they find out later on that that they're categorically not, that the
So
thing that is
ordinary.
interesting is that they're
Ordinary.
average. Yeah.
Yeah. And that their averageness, or that their ordinariness, at various points in the novel, sometimes it's a weapon and sometimes it's a tool, or a
Right.
weapon used against them, and sometimes it's a tool that they manage to use. I Going back to some of our very first conversations about this book when I first started it, I remember being so surprised, and I shouldn't have been, that when you had said something like, I would love to be on one of those Mars One missions or something like that, because that was one of the first things that sort of got me thinking about this, was looking at the, to me, just unbelievable scroll of like reality show contestants trying to be on the Mars One mission, and my sense of complete alienation from anyone who would want that, while at the same time, I was pregnant with my first child, completely flipping out about what world I was going to bring them into, and wanting desperately to get away.
Right.
And that was part of the beginning, being like, well, am I like those people who also want to get away, or are they different? I don't know. Let's find out.
Well, it is, I think the reason that I have many different sort of categorical reasons for wanting to go to space, but the reason that I was always like, I would get on the Mars One mission is because
you would die on Mars.
Oh, I dream of dying in space. It is my number one.
Your number one fantasy of death.
Yes, a peaceful death in space with everyone but then I can't, but honestly, now, like, I guess the question of like my ideal death has gotten more complicated since also having a baby, but it's, it's like before it was like, doesn't matter anyway. But I think, the reason that I always thought it would be so interesting is the reason that this novel is so, from the very first sentence, so obviously rich and fascinating the exact way it is that, if you have 12 people on a space station, it is the humanity in extremity is one of the most interesting things I can imagine. But so let's talk about the, who is sending the people up there, like who they're sent up there. What is the entity using their selfhood as a tool?
Who is pulling the strings?
Yeah.
Census, a giant telecom company that is not based on any particular tech company, but sort of all of them have something in common with all of them, who I think of as really our rulers.
Right.
Really. Have built a space station so to help billionaires have a sort of bolt hole to escape climate change. Much like billionaires now often buy places in New Zealand or something. It's just like a place to get away from it all, whatever it all is. And what if to get away? Oh, Judy Ann. Sorry, Judy Ann just bit my foot.
I'd love a Judy Ann cameo if she's right there at your foot.
Judy Ann. Sorry, she might come back.
Okay.
That rabbit. Judy Ann's a rabbit. They've built this, they're building the space station or the space palace to be sort of a condo for billionaires, to flee the effects of climate change that, they've been a large part of causing. But then the billionaire fantasy is that you can just beat the game and escape the realities that you've caused for other people by creating a new reality for yourself. So they have some scientists who are up there both to make it work, to sort of make some positive optics, like, look, if these people would go up there, then, and they're so smart, then it's probably a really great place that you would want to go to. But the scientists all have their own reasons for going up there. Some of them are up there for their own research, and some of them are up there because they desperately want to remove their families from the various dangers of life on Earth in 2033.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also, the reason that this company Census is able to muster, even the beginnings of this project is because like they have amassed, like the companies that currently exist, vastly much more power than any nation state by essentially surveillance capitalism. And,
right.
and something, an iteration of it that here is entirely plausible and beyond nightmarish. Like I think the most interesting thing about this book is that, there are there are like big system climate change novels, you know, there are surveillance dystopia novels, you know, those, I was thinking, I mean, it's strangely less of those that are carried at a decade or 2 decades into the future in the sort of Kim Stanley Robinson way of all of this climate fiction, and, you know, the kind of climate fiction that we more typically read. There actually isn't that much that carries forward the surveillance dystopia in as, you know, you would think for how much we talk about it, but
Yeah.
this is very much both, and they're deeply intertwined, right? The climate apocalypse and the absolute loss of human privacy are two of the main reasons that a person would want to escape, right? And or start over. And yeah, and both are driving factors that send various characters to space. And, you know, I remember that both things were present in early drafts. Like you know, it was the space station, and census was conducting, you know, there were the, which still remain in the book, there were these alphabetical levels of privacy that you had to pay your way out of. And the only way that you could not sort of turn over your DNA to, you know, be able to buy things was to just, you know, pay $1 billion and be privacy level Z or A or whichever one it is, right? But I wondered, like, the extent to which those ideas are linked together, the climate apocalypse and the loss of private life, basically, the surveillance dystopia. How did that change in the years that you were writing it? Because in the years that you were writing it, both things in our world got significantly crazier, right?
Well, I think so. One thing that I think is important that those two themes have in common is our individual sense of helplessness.
Right.
That when we look at the climate crisis and when we look at surveillance capitalism, even just thinking about like our usage of social media or usage of, you know, or Alexa or smart car. I mean, just any, both of those themes have this sense of individual helplessness because the machine is already moving and the machine is much bigger than we are and there's nothing we can do. And I would take that even to the level of like poo-pooing virtue signaling. Like, yes, virtue signaling when it's empty is lousy, but if you're trying to create small change, if you're trying to create change, then it has to start somewhere. And each of those small changes on an individual level does create a teeny weeny little spectacle, even if it's only witnessed by the people in your family. But I think because the machine and the systems are so huge and so completely undefeatable to us, we feel so incredibly helpless to both of the climate crisis machines and the surveillance capitalism machines. And to me, that's what they have in common that sort of pushed me to tie them together. But the other thing is just that when I think about 2033 and I am drawing a line from here to there, I can't leave either of these things out. Just like all of the other issues in the book, and I know it's really stuffed, they're there because I can't imagine life without them. I can't imagine us not being ruled by these concerns. I don't see a way to write a novel about the future without writing about personal technology, and I don't see a way to write a novel about the future without writing about climate change. So it really didn't start as either of those kinds of novels. It really started as a novel about what will family life in 2033 be like.
Right.
As for how it changed over the years, well, I kept getting scooped, but not by other writers, but by reality.
The world, yeah.
Yeah. When I
Like
was
what?
writing my very first draft of this, living in Ann Arbor, one of my friends' boyfriends had just taken a job in design at Apple, and he couldn't tell anyone what he was doing. No one had any idea what he was doing. And here I am writing this novel, and my version of this like life privacy shattering technology is like a glorified Fitbit, which then the Apple Watch is unveiled. My friend's boyfriend's been working on it the whole time. It's on the shelves, and I'm like, oh no.
Yeah.
I'm a chronically late adopter. Like I'm like the last person to have a smartphone, the last person to have everything. I don't want any of it. And I realized I was just going to have to throw the Frisbee a whole lot farther out to understand acceleration and technological acceleration. And that was a challenge.
But you're right. I mean, it's funny, like, you know, this the Jennifer Egan's new book is also set in part of it is set in the mid 2030s. And it's like, you've essentially arrived at the same conclusion about what is inevitable. And, I mean, it's like you both threw the Frisbee and it landed in 2035. I mean, well, so maybe we should talk about it. Like, so it's not a Fitbit, it's more than a Fitbit. It's, one of the features, one of the things that determines what family life or, the experience of childhood or identity formation or, anything is this the concept of being faced.
Yeah.
Can you explain?
So the technology in the book, which is probably both the space station itself and the technology, the phone technology in the book, are the furthest out. But they are things that are already in process. I didn't come up with these out of just thin air. They're not total fantasies. They're things that many people are smarter than me are already working on. But it's an inner ear. It's a phone that goes in your inner ear, and it has like a proboscis, like a hummingbird's tongue, that goes into your brain and has a retinal interface. So the idea is that you have your phone, but it's in your head. You can pull it out, but once you've gotten so used to having the dashboard of your entire life, everything that we can imagine on our smartphone now, plus all of these new technologies in your vision all the time, to remove it all of a sudden would be completely destabilizing. Like literally, you would lose your balance and you would pass out because your inner ear would be so completely destabilized. So people it becomes part of them.
Right. There's a doctor that sort of recommends to an adolescent character, it's like, take it out every once in a while for like a long camping weekend.
Yeah.
But
nobody does that.
Nobody does it.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't either. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and of course, I wrote this book over such a long time. And even though it's 400 pages long now, it was originally like 800 pages.
Loved all 800.
But, I remember writing scenes about like grandparents taking out their phones and then they have a fall because they lose their balance and then there's a blood, but that's just, again, that's me throwing a Frisbee and spiraling, as some people would call it, but in fiction writing, we just call it imagination. Yeah.
Well, and part of this is that like through the, a feature of this technology, both in real life and as it exists. I remember I was reporting a TikTok piece a long time ago, and I talked to some UX developer that was like, this is the technology behind TikTok is the technology to, not just to motion capture, but to predict, it's actively predictive. It's also the technology that a sort of AI would need to acquire to create fake humans kind of automatically, right? And that's also part of it. And anyway, as with the dashboard that we have overlaid over our brains in our phones, and the dashboard that people have kind of over their eyes being like, oh, that's your Spanish textbook, you should probably look at that before tomorrow morning, you have a quiz, don't forget, drink some water, etc. It's it's the person seeing, but it's also the company, like almost most importantly, right? Like it's and
the company is seeing everything that you see, but the company is also influencing how you see what you see, and therefore really shaping the person that you are becoming and the decisions that you make. And that happens now. That's already very true of us. We're so completely shaped by the technology that mediates our lives already. And so I'm just trying to imagine how that technology could become so completely inextricable that it's so deeply a part of us that we don't even know how to disengage our real selves from it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there's the algo, which is in caps the whole way through. And yeah, I mean, what it is it's a continuation of, again, the world that we already live in, where it's the total end-to-end instrumentalization of every possible human impulse, which as of now is essentially our thoughts. It's what we type in our Gmail. It's what we search on the computer. But it's here. It is it's perception itself. It's the cognitive mechanism itself that is entering the algo. And one of the characters, I don't know, is it a spoiler?
I think you can talk about what Tess is doing. I think that's fine.
Okay. Well, can you talk about Tess? Tess is a character
Okay.
who is, I don't want to say she's like a you stand-in at the beginning. She's obviously not, but comes.
Well, so,
Right.
Okay. So Tess is a young social psychologist. And in 2033, I think a big part of being a social psychologist is going to be using personal technology. People are already doing eye tracking studies to understand how we perceive the world. And I was reading some of that as I created her character. But Tess is employed by Census to watch the views, meaning the sort of everything that the viewers or the users of these phones see from their own eyes, to watch them and code their behaviors, where they look, when they look, how they react to things, so that those technologies, the algorithm can be used to create. I am not naturally a person who uses these words in this language and this jargon, and I've had to learn a lot of it. And I want to make sure that I stay true to my normal human roots. But Tess is someone whose job is to code all of their behaviors to create models, meaning mathematical models, that are representations of someone's personality, really. And those mathematical models can predict what you do next, what choice you will make when given this menu of choices, and this menu of choices being the world as you see it right in front of you at this moment. So she's watching all of these people, she's spying on them, she's becoming very deeply invested in their lives. And then she is she's coding their behavior in such a way that the company will use that code to then be able to read other people. The idea being that if we can study a few people to understand how individuals work, we will understand how individuals work, and we can map that technology onto the entire population of users.
Right.
But she originated, there was a version of the book that I loved. It was Too Evil, where Tess narrated the whole book. And at that point, she was very much an authorial stand-in. She was like this sort of Henry James figure. And that was me thinking about omniscient narrators and getting angry about how much power they have in a novel, very specifically thinking of Henry James at the time, and how much power they have to, dictate the thoughts and reactions of their characters. And obviously it's fiction. An author has all of the power to dictate. But in a novel with an omniscient narrator, I think we buy into this belief that one person can really completely understand a whole menu of other people. And I was thinking at the time, still am, about how technology is giving us that same illusion all the time. Mm-hmm. And Tess became a 2033 unwitting Henry James. Yeah.
What is it that makes, because the first time she had been a naysayer, mm-hmm. she had been
never census. Yeah. I'm an academic.
But then the purity almost of the data, the control. Yeah. There is a sort of authorial.
About 5 years, no, not 5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, John, my husband, John, was offered, who's an academic, he's a social scientist, was offered access to a data set, and he came home and he was excited and uncomfortable about it because it would be amazing to work with that data set. But he was horrified that data set existed. And I was horrified that it existed. And there's this sense like, oh, but you're a good person. And if someone's going to use this data set, then it should be you because you won't do evil with it. But what an absolute trap that is, because as soon as you have access to that power, how good can you really be?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it is, and Tess's evolution when she realizes how, she thinks that she is the one doing the shaping. And then it's very clear that she has been shaped so severely. One of the things that I loved, I think the thing that I was so obsessed with about this book from the very beginning was that this is a vision of space. I mean, and what you were saying earlier about, you don't speak in this kind of jargon, and that, it's the thing that makes this book so incredible is that I don't think you're capable of writing a book that's not like deeply human. Like it's like I don't think you could do it if you tried, and you can't, and I don't think you can talking about it. But and one of the ways that this manifests, I mean, it manifests from the beginning in the sort of mission statement of, the extraordinary to ordinary that, is like the sort of surveillance and manipulation question baked into, the larger, the larger sort of intellectual landscape of it, but also just the practice of writing fiction. But the vision of space where it's not, it's not, it's a shitty space station. Like, yeah, it's not sexy. The people aren't in, the people aren't like glowing. The walls aren't, it's not, the surfaces are smeared with fingerprints. There's, weird smells drifting around.
It's a long haul flight that never ends.
Yeah. And it's like, it's one of the, it's, you almost wonder, like, obviously nothing that, a billionaire who dreams of beating the game and just colonizing whatever and extending humanity to the edges of the galaxy while Earth burns or whatever. It's like they probably think they're like no, the version that we'll do will be clean. It will be really pristine white. There will be, it will look like the rendering behind you. There will be perfect gardens and iridescent, godly, whatever. But it's like, there's so much.
There's nowhere to put the mess.
Yeah, there's nowhere to put the mess. Everything is 3D printed out of foam. Like material. Like there's this great description of like something's supposed to look pearlescent, but it just looks like packing peanuts or something. And
I had so much fun.
I wanted if you could talk about that.
I mean, I absolutely loved designing the station from like sort of like imagine an angel designer and the naysayer and a no designer really on my shoulder all the time, where I would design the station the way that I thought that Simon Vaswani and that Catherine Sun would want it to be. And then I would try to look at that same sort of glowing image, that pearlescent. I think at one point I was looking at a lot of hard candy, and I was just thinking about the way hard candy looks, like lustrous and rough and sort of lined and stringy and textured. And I was thinking about those colors, and I was like, okay, hard candy, this is where we're going with hard candy. And then also just thinking about like the way candy looks when it's like crumpled up in the bottom of your bag, or like a used Kleenex.
Once some dust is on that hard candy. Once
purse
dust has gotten into the wrapper.
Smashed up goldfish crackers. But just like I would make the beauty, and then I would come in and try to just like shine a really harsh light on it. And those were some of the most fun parts of writing the book.
Is there any precedent? Like, obviously there's so much precedent, again, referring to the spaceship behind you, there's so much precedent, for the one vision, but and I like, what are there, did you find any useful precedents for this, the actually human vision of what it would be? I mean, obviously there's the reality of,
I would say this is very literal, but it also really works as a metaphor, is that I was equally influenced by images like this one. Oh, I looked behind me like it was really there.
It looked incredibly convincing.
So this is an image of an artistic rendering of the Stanford Taurus, which is a ring style space station, which Parallaxis also is. And so many images of space stations and concepts for space stations are based on this ring. You see it in movies. And it's because we can really understand how it would work, how it would rotate around the center, and you would walk along the inside of the outside there. But that was, it was in 1975, Stanford held a conference with NASA and to sort of bring in concepts. I love looking at those old images so much. And I was also reading Mary Roach's Packing for Mars. And no one knocks down a beautiful image or an illusion like Mary Roach.
Right.
And so to see those images together, where she's also talking about like the problem of bathrooms in space and like famous stories about astronauts having poop just like floating by, and they're like, oh my God, it's loose. Reconciling those images sort of became the project of designing the space station. What would Mary Roach see in Parallaxis?
And okay, so when did you start the book?
I started it in 2013 or 2014. And I started with the station. I started with Parallaxis and then Alex. And
Alex being the
Alex is a biochemist who is trying to create a species of algae, or a modified species of algae that will capture more carbon from the atmosphere, and then can then be let loose in the oceans to make algae islands and suck up carbon.
And for Alex, I mean, God, Alex is, I'm so stressed thinking about Alex right now. He's, he feels this, being the sort of singular algae scientist on this space station, given all of the resources of census basically, and this big shining kind of spotlight, the like necessity and the pain of his need to engineer a way out.
This terrible ego. I mean, I want to shake it a lot of the time.
But then you read it and you're like, but if he got the algae,
but he did get it once, he could get it again. Yeah.
But he's But that I find so interesting because it's like you write about it and you're like you have a line in your acknowledgments, just the I mean, I've been thinking a lot about geoengineering just generally. Talking to a crypto guy the other day that was really into that we're gonna market our way out, we're gonna engineer our way out of it. And I was talking to Andrew, my partner, about this, where it was like, you feel that you want to shake the person, being like the ego of thinking that you don't, that anything we do is not just going to make it worse. But then there's a part of you, and in reading this book, you can feel it with Alex, that like I so badly want him to be able to engineer his way out. I so badly want the perfect algae solution. It's not covering a quarter of the earth with carbon capture farms. It's not, turning the sky red so that, so that the temperature goes down 3 degrees. Like it's algae. It's perfect.
For me, like a lot of my love for Alex as a character and what makes him real to me is that super algae, as he thinks of it, like he has sort of accepted in this sad way that it's not going to be perfect, that it is going to continue to drive the extinction of some species. But there's this, he's at the point, or rather maybe it's better to say that the novel is at the point where a perfect solution is no longer possible. And there's a lot of tension in the novel about whether it's responsible or irresponsible to pursue imperfect solutions, or to fail to, because, something will be lost. I talked to this.
Was that baked in from the beginning? Sorry.
Yeah. Because maybe it's because I feel so ordinary in my own life, that to me, the pursuit of heroism always appears to be a delusion of heroism. Maybe it's because I was reading Middlemarch, but this idea that the exceptionalism of the superhero, I don't trust it and I resent it. But a guy with some bad imposter syndrome who is trying not to let good be the enemy of perfect, or perfection be the enemy of good, perfection be the enemy of good. But a guy who has sort of acknowledged the limits of what is possible and is trying to work within those limits in what is still a really outrageously ambitious way. Yeah, and he's working alone in the novel because, we have to have all of these other people. In real life, he'll be working in a big lab, but this is also about ego and delusions of heroism. So
I cut you off when you were saying you were talking to someone.
So the algae was probably the aspect of the research in the novel that I was most worried about. It seemed like it would be the thing that I was least likely to get right. No matter how much I read, it's not my native language at all. And I didn't even do well in high school science. But I found this wonderful bioastronauticist named Dr. Emily Matula, who lives in Texas and works for NASA. And she has been studying the behavior of algae in space. And I was I was trying to read her papers and try to map what she was saying onto my work. And then my husband was finally like, she might actually be interested in talking to a novelist. That might be kind of like a fun, freaky thing in her day, not another chore. And I reached out to her and she was amazingly helpful and really helped me get a lot of the science right. Yeah.
This is one of the greatest miracles about writing. This is the greatest sort of privilege that every time I am able to do it, I'm like, you shouldn't be
talk to these people and they're not they don't resent the intrusion, your silly narrative intrusion into their very real work. It's amazing.
Yeah, and it's also it's what a thing to be able to speak to someone that has been studying this for 25 years straight and just be able to call them up. It still feels radically sci-fi in itself.
I asked her on one of our Zooms, I was like, okay, so in this situation, I'd read her paragraph. I was like, in this situation, what's the worst thing that could happen?
Yeah.
She was shuddering. She was like, well, one time. Yeah. And without giving too much away, one time.
It happens.
It created another engine in the algae-based plot of this algae-based thriller.
I'm all in on the algae.
One of my friends early on thought algae was like a placeholder for something. She's like, I didn't think you were really going all in.
No, it's perfect. What if it eats plastic? It's perfect.
Yeah.
So I wondered.
Wait,
what?
This is important. I really don't want to wait for you to ask me this, but you asked me about the beginnings of coming up with this, and there's something that I've always wanted to tell you.
What?
You did my questions for me in New York when I was on tour for Unbecoming.
Yes.
And you replaced Anne Helen Peterson at the last minute. And you asked me about the character from that book and if she could have taken a different path from her sort of initial mistakes. And at the time,
I remember asking that question, being like, I shouldn't have asked that question.
I was like, no, of course she couldn't, because I just spent so long with the character that I could imagine no other reality. I was past choose your own adventure, but it bothered me that was my answer. And I felt like a debt or a duty or something to write a teenage girl who feels really troubled and makes a mistake and comes through. Mm-hmm. And Mary Agnes's character really stems from my sort of troubled feeling after that question and that conversation.
Wow.
So you really very directly contributed to that character.
To Magnus.
Magnus, yes.
And Magnus really comes through. Magnus carries the whole end in so many ways. Wow. Sure. Oh my God.
Way to go, Jia.
Mm-hmm. She I mean, the children, having the children in the novel, I imagine was somewhat kind of agonizing to think about these kids who are trying to make a life under these conditions that, we think of as inescapable dystopia, but in 10 years from now, we'll be like, it's life,
What if it's just normal?
Yeah. But the kids, I mean, I'm just thinking about what it was like for you to work on this in the last, 7 years, let's say, while you had 2 children and the world, just kept doing we keep doing what we're doing to the world. And, every 3 years, the IPCC report comes out, and it's like,
Worse than we
almost, it's worse than we thought. It's almost too late. The point has come at which decisive action will no longer, be.
And then everyone's like, ah, and
then someone has to make breakfast, and
right.
you have to go to work, and then I'm writing a piece on climate change right now, and it's like, there's no, the brain just falls apart. And but I think I've asked you this before, but writing about these things that point towards the specific ways that the future seems to be kind of inevitably crushing, right? Both global warming and sort of inescapable surveillance, and the like involuntary mining of the self by beyond by companies that are richer than any entity, like 1 billion times richer than any entity should be. I mean, because I have wondered about the relationship between your lock on these things personally, and then the novel's lock on these things, and I've assumed that both have driven the other, that obviously that's an essential concern is what made you write a book about these things, but then the amount of research, the amount of reading that
oh God,
you must have been doing, and reading about subjects like 2 subjects about which additional knowledge is arguably not helpful at all.
Did you
find yourself thinking about these things less or more? Did it excise it?
Well, I had the super cool idea that a really good way to work through my fears about the future would be to just write a novel about it. Just work through it, and that didn't go great. It went great in the sense that I did write the novel about it, but my despair worsened for sure,
right.
Both because I had my children and because I just wrote an essay about this. Someone published it, but I'm trying to write, or I've been trying to write about the really strange and intense experience of raising the generation that will inhabit the future that you are trying to imagine. Right. And all of the fine print that I had honestly avoided because I anticipated having these children. Even as I questioned personally the responsibility of having children right now, which, some people scoff at, but I think that's a very, very real concern. And not having children because you're really worried about climate stability seems extremely reasonable to me, and really more like, I am proud of people who feel that way for the power of their rational mind over their biological fever to have children, which seems to have just kind of me for a few years. But I had to read all of these very specific reports about what life might look like on our planet in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years, in 50 years, while imagining that in vivid detail, while on the other side of the wall of my office, I hear my kids yelling about us being out of graham crackers. And that was extraordinarily intense. And I'm using intense as a euphemism here because I wouldn't actually wish that emotional journey on anyone. What it did do for me as a person is that I underwent some kind of a transformation from someone who wants to write about and imagine futures to someone who wants to act upon them. And I was not that person really before I wrote this book. I was someone who made little personal choices to reflect my concerns and then did a lot of hand wringing. And in that respect, I'm very grateful for having to read all of this fine print, which is a euphemism for the destruction of the world, because that transformation has been very good for me in my life. Yeah.
It's interesting. This is the kind of transformation that people often locate upon the act of having children itself. But it's interesting that and in many ways, kind of feel the same way, that I love to know that it was actually this novel that did that.
It was very much the process of writing it. I mean, maybe something similar would have happened, but I don't think that it would have felt as akin to Salvation.
Yeah.
As it did. As desperate. Yeah.
Well, I can foresee us talking about this for about 6 hours next time we see each other, but this exact thing.
Dumping babies on our knee and talking about the destruction of the world, just, you know.
I feel like the thing that made me feel okay about it was deciding that it was a completely unethical decision. And I still haven't been able to square, like that was the thing that gave me, and I'm like, but let's go. I think, John, can we beckon you back from?
Hello.
Beckon you back. I think we've just got a couple questions.
Oh, my
we just got a couple questions to end with, and thank you both. I'm blown away. It's so great to see you both. I'm like,
so good to see you.
I'm zooming past my professional capacity here, and then just as your friends, just so lovely to hear you both talk to each other and about this amazing book. So
there's so many Ann Arbor parts of this book that I had to cut out so it wouldn't be 800 pages long.
So James writes, Rebecca, I'd love to know more about your writing process. E.g., are you more of a morning or evening person? Do you show work in progress or loved ones for feedback?
This is a good question. This is possibly a tenser question than James realized when he asked. I used to be an afternoon person, like when everyone else was spent for the day. That's when I would sort of come alive in the golden, syrupy afternoon heat. Now I'm just a childcare person. You know, it might be morning, it might be afternoon, it might be after the kids went to bed, but it's when I can, I do. And my process is super messy. I overwrite and then either cut on my own or some blessed saint of a person cuts for me. But yeah, I just go long. And as far as showing it to loved ones, my incredibly brilliant and patient husband read a couple early drafts of this novel, and then we agreed, for the sake of our relationship and our love and respect for each other, that he would not read any more until it was done. He helped me so much with a lot of the research at the beginning of the book. If you're not a scientist by training and you're just looking at the field of like science, it's insane. I mean, it's like the Thomas Dolby song. So he really helped me a lot with finding paths and directions. But then we had to stop there. I have shown it to several incredible friends. Very, very rarely do I show it to more than the same friend more than once. Only then when we're in a real, very serious transactional trading relationship, because you just can't give hundreds and hundreds of pages to someone over and over and over again, unless you're really in a trading partnership. Did I answer?
Yes.
I remember you saying once, like, John was like, let's set your next book somewhere chill. Somewhere nice and chill or something.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, and let's set it somewhere that I don't know anything about.
Yeah.
There's two questions here that are similar, so I'm going to try to do my best to combine them on the spot. Both questions mention that the book is a departure from Unbecoming, in that in the first, the primary driver seems like it is to world build rather than to see how characters develop. Both are sort of asking how you went from the very visceral human drama, narrowly focused, I don't want to say narrowly focused, but tightly focused on this, getting very close to these select human beings
Yeah.
to this, a bit wider scope novel.
Yeah.
I guess both questions are asking about the motivations there, the decision process behind that.
The incredible departure of writing first a book about a failed art heist and then a book in space. Yes, I understand your confusion. First, I would say that Unbecoming was a very claustrophobic. It's a very claustrophobic book in the tightness of the human drama in it. Even when she's moving throughout the world, so much of her dread creates this really tight feeling. And I think one of the reasons that I was drawn to a space station is really for the same kind of claustrophobia. Those people that you're up there with, you cannot get away from them. You are all waiting in line for the bathroom. And you are really stuck and no one can leave. And that potential for drama and foible and falling in love and out of love was very irresistible to me. I think the other thing that they have in common is someone telling a lie and not quite being able to make right in time. And then as far as the radical departure, I think that I have really made some trouble for myself as a writer, and this will plague me my entire writing life, which is that I like to tell a story that is having an argument with some existing structure of expectations. Like, Unbecoming wasn't really a thriller. It's a character study that's wearing a thriller outfit. And this novel is really a social novel and a family novel that's in a spaceship. I have stumbled into a sci-fi room or staggered out of my lane, but it's because I like to have the friction of the reader's expectations. And when I'm writing, that friction is all internal. What do I expect from a sci-fi? What do I expect from this kind of story? And how am I arguing with that? This is a real problem for me in bookstores. John, I don't know where Literati puts my books because I don't know if you can put them together. And the thing is, I'm kind of already worried that if when I write the third one, it's going to have to go in yet another place, because it's that tension and argument and conversation of the expectation of a genre and whatever knot I'm trying to untangle that interests me more than anything else.
Thank you. Unfortunately, the answer to that conundrum about shelving is way more boring than I could possibly.
Make me my own little section.
I think, well, I think we probably will make a little shimmy shelf. I think we should. I think we'll do a lightning round. We've got a few more questions here.
Sure.
And we've got a few minutes. Molly wants to know how you're taking action on the things you now feel empowered to take action on, if you're willing to share.
I was sort of radicalized by reading Doug Tallamy and his Homegrown National Parks project, which stems from E.O. Wilson's half-Earth idea that we need half of the Earth to be supporting biodiversity, mostly through native plants. And I became, this sounds so small, but it's really not. It's really quite powerful. And then I became a garden person. I was already a garden person, and I became a native plant habitat person. And that means looking for places that you can take advantage of to create wildlife corridors, even in small little islands that might be hooked up together. Your yard, your neighbor's yard. Can you convince your neighbor's neighbor? What about your neighbor's neighbor's neighbor? What about the gopher colony over there? Can we get on the other side of the gopher colony so we can link up bird habitat? Not gophers, we're not really worried about gophers. But how you can use what we think of as sort of a modest hobby or a vocation like gardening that's really tied up in like food gardening for sustenance, by all means do that. Or like ornamental fancy gardening, lawns, against that, sorry. But how can we use this sort of modest term like gardening to actually create huge amounts of life? And I mean literal life. You can actually create biodiversity in a very small area. And then if you can connect it to other people's small areas, you can really affect some real change. We have nesting owls that we didn't used to have.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Anne would like to know if you have any ideas taking shape, or have you already begun working on a next book?
Yeah, so I did start it. I have started it. I've been working on it in my mind for a couple of years now, just sort of rolling it around. I want to write about friendship. Yeah, and I think that these first two books have been so haunted by secrecy and isolation. And I think that I am really craving like the incredibly rich and meaningful, treasured friendships in my life that have kind of nursed me through the process of writing these books. My God, Katie Leonard's probably watching this. Katie alone, Jesus. I really want to write a book that I want to live in. And that challenge sounds both exciting and very warm to me. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I look forward to that book as well. And we've got one more question. Ryan Perkins would like to know, have you made or had any good food lately?
Tell Ryan to buy my book and stop asking for free copies. And have I made any good food lately? Yes. And tonight, my celebratory dinner for after this will be kimchi fried rice with baked tofu. And there's a new kimchi in town that's made of beets and carrots. And it has ginger in it and orange peel. It's got like a floral thing happening. Anyway, I really love it. Highly recommend.
Thank you. There's some folks who say hi. Rebecca, I have to say hi on their behalf. Yeah. Mairead says hi.
Hi, Mairead.
Mike Kleiman says hi. James, thank you. James is mentioning that he's up at 1:30 a.m. in the UK, and so happy to be doing so. I know Maya's watching from the wee hours in Korea. So yes, love abounds from all over the world to you, Rebecca, on the launch of this book. Thank you so much for being here. Gia, it's so great to see you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your amazing, wonderful questions. Thank you both. I miss you, and I'll see you soon. And to all of our viewers, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you at the next event. Take care, all. Have a great night.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye.